My name is Joshua Nolan, and I'm 36 years old. For 12 years, I kept Hudson & Locke's fixed income desk profitable, while others chased flashy deals that burned out faster than they lit up. I've never been one for attention, because I know that in this business, the louder you talk, the less you usually know. So I built my desk the old-fashioned way, day after day, trade after trade. No fireworks, just smart moves and steady hands. And then came Julian Hudson, 28 years old, fresh from Harvard, tailored suits, slicked back hair, and the kind of smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The kind of guy who thought experience was a myth and swagger could replace skill. Julian wasn't just anyone. He was the CEO's only son. One Monday morning, the entire floor was buzzing. I didn't care much for gossip, but when you hear your name being whispered around like a stock tip, you pay attention. Julian's taking over the fixed income desk, someone said. I froze mid-coffee sip. Wait, my desk? That afternoon, the CEO made it official. Leadership development opportunity, he called it. Said Julian needed real-world experience, and that I should support the transition. Support the transition? I built that desk from nothing. Julian walked in like he owned the place, which I guess, in a way, he did. His first move: gut my risk models, the ones that kept us afloat during 3 market meltdowns. These formulas are ancient, he smirked, tossing my reports aside like old newspapers. Your algo looks like it was built by cavemen trying to solve Sudoku. He replaced 2 of my best traders with a pair of guys who high-fived in meetings and kept calling each other bro. One of them used a magic 8-ball as a decision tool. I thought he was joking. He wasn't. I tried to raise concerns. Tried to explain that what we did wasn't just about numbers, but about timing, instinct, control. He laughed. Don't be scared of progress, Nolan, he said, clapping me on the back. Go read a book or something. This is how the game's played now. 3 days later, I was called into HR. We're going in a new direction, the woman said without looking up from her screen. You're being let go. That was it. No handshake. No thank you. Just a file box and a security escort like I was some kind of criminal. People avoided eye contact as I walked past them. The same people I'd trained, vouched for, carried through rough quarters. But the worst part? The elevator. Julian stepped in as I was heading down with my box. He grinned like it was Christmas. The old guard's dead, Nolan, he said, arms folded. Maybe try consulting. Or teaching. Something safe. I didn't say a word. Just watched the numbers tick down to the lobby. 10-9-8. He adjusted his cuffs and smiled at his reflection in the mirrored wall. No hard feelings, right? I walked out and never looked back. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It makes people careless. They forget you were ever in the room. They stop guarding the door. And I was just getting started. After I walked out of Hudson & Locke, I expected to feel angry. Or maybe bitter. 12 years of hard work, late nights, and loyalty, erased with a single HR meeting and a smirk in an elevator. But mostly, I felt empty. Maybe I was in shock. I took a cab and went home with a box of office junk, dropped it on the floor of my Brooklyn apartment, and just stood there. The place was small, 1 bedroom, thin walls, no dishwasher. But it was mine. It was small and quiet. And now it was going to be my war room. I opened my laptop. Half out of habit, I logged into my old Bloomberg terminal account, expecting a no access message. But it worked. IT had forgotten to cut me off. I stared at the glowing screen for a long time. All the real-time trading data, portfolios, and client updates, still right there. Like I'd never left. I should have reported it. Logged out. Done the right thing. I didn't. Instead, I pulled up the live feed from the fixed income desk, my desk. Julian's team had already started making trades. A lot of them. And right away, I could see they were messing up. They were buying up hard-to-sell bonds like candy, probably thinking they were making big moves. But these weren't simple investments. These were complicated deals. Bonds that could fall apart if one thing went wrong. You had to understand the risks, read the fine print. Julian's frat boy analysts? They didn't even know where the fine print was. They were pricing everything as if it were gold, when really, some of it was fool's gold. I saw trades going through that made my stomach turn. Big bets with no backup plan. No exit strategy. They weren't managing risk. They were playing roulette. Have you subscribed to our channel yet? Hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. I spent hours just watching. Coffee in hand, lights off, fingers hovering over the keyboard. At first, it felt like rubbernecking at a car crash. Morbid curiosity. But the more I watched, the more something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the firm. It was about clients who trusted us to protect their money. People like retirees, schools, teachers, firefighters. Julian was gambling with their futures. I hoped someone would do something. A few days later, the first big crack appeared. Pinecrest Pension Fund, our largest and most loyal client, pulled out $200 million overnight. Gone. Just like that. Why? Because Julian had promised them some fancy derivatives hedge that was supposed to make their portfolio safer. Instead, it tanked. The loss wasn't just money. It was trust. The kind of trust that takes years to build and seconds to destroy. The office scrambled. Rumor was, the boardroom at Hudson and Locke looked like a funeral that morning. I watched the chaos unfold in real time. Spreadsheets flying, calls dropping, analysts pacing. Julian didn't even seem to understand why the deal had gone bad. He just blamed the software. No accountability. No shame. I should have felt satisfied. But all I felt was clarity on the error of their decision. Julian wasn't just arrogant. He was dangerous. And that meant I had a decision to make. Sit on the sidelines and let the ship sink. Or, I was eating cold cereal at my kitchen counter when my phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, I listened to the message. Joshua Nolan. This is Diana Shaw. I heard Hudson's bleeding talent. Let's talk. Diana Shaw, managing director at Shaw & Greer, our biggest competitor and once upon a time, my toughest rival. She was smart, focused, and known for cleaning up messes that made others run. If she was calling me, it meant the damage at Hudson and Locke was making waves. Part of me was curious, flattered even, but I wasn't ready to jump ship. Not yet. I had work to do. I started keeping notes, logging trades, tracking patterns. Julian's team kept making the same mistakes, buying high, selling low, chasing trends like kids chasing bubbles. They ignored warning signs, skipped due diligence, and gambled on borrowed time. One day, I saw something that made my pulse skip. They were dealing with a risky counterparty, a firm that was barely holding on. One wrong move, and the whole trade would collapse. And yet, there it was, another massive bet, placed with full confidence and zero protection. Julian had no idea he was walking into a minefield. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. That's when I realized I wasn't just watching anymore. I was planning. I wasn't the type to throw punches, but I knew how to let someone knock themselves out. Let the numbers do the damage. Let the truth surface. Julian had kicked me out of the firm I helped build. But he forgot one thing. You can't erase history. And sometimes the quiet guy in the corner, he's the one who writes your ending. I was folding laundry in my living room. T-shirts I never wore, socks that somehow always lost their pair, when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Again. This time I answered. Joshua, it's Greg. I paused. Greg Banner. Hudson and Locke CFO. Calm voice, gray hair, nervous smile. A good man in a bad storm. What's up, Greg? I said, trying not to sound too cold. We need help, he said. Real help. Julian's trades are out of control. Our books are bleeding. The board's spooked. And, he hesitated. And you want me to come clean it up? I finished for him. There was a long silence on the line. Yes, he said quietly. Not full-time. Just as a contract advisor. Short-term. Quiet. Behind the scenes. I looked at the pile of laundry. Then at the Bloomberg screen still glowing in the corner. I hadn't stopped watching their downfall since the day they pushed me out. Let me think about it, I said. But I already knew my answer. 2 days later, I walked back through the glass doors of Hudson and Locke. Same lobby. Same marble floors. Same fake smiles. Julian wasn't there to greet me. Of course not. Word was he'd been avoiding the office since the Pinecrest fallout. Too busy hiding behind his frat boy army and blaming legacy systems. I signed the paperwork quietly. Consultant badge. 6-week contract. Just enough rope. Greg led me to a small office in the back, far from the main trading floor. No windows. No distractions. Perfect. I sat down, opened my laptop, and got to work. But not in the way they expected. First, I called Marcus. We'd gone to Columbia together. He was now a senior examiner at the OCC, the agency that watches over banks and investment firms. We weren't close friends, but we shared beers, war stories, and a mutual respect for each other's brains. Marcus, I said, you off the record? He laughed. Always. What do you have? I sent him a file. Julian's trading log from the past 4 weeks. A spreadsheet full of risky bets, ignored red flags, and deals that looked smart, until you realized how shaky they really were. Jesus, Marcus whispered after a long pause. This is reckless. Yeah, I said. And he's just getting started. Marcus promised to take a closer look. Maybe send a few examiners in for a routine check. That was the first spark. Next came the presentation. Julian had a big pitch coming up, his first as acting head of fixed income. A chance to prove to the board he wasn't a total disaster. He'd been working on it for weeks, preparing slides, practicing his speech. I offered to help, of course. Fresh eyes, I said. He didn't trust me, not really. But he wanted to impress his dad, the board, and the press. So he let me in. I built him a custom data set. Looked real. Polished. Full of charts, trends, and pretty predictions. But here's the thing. I fudged the numbers. Just a little. Not enough to set off alarms. But enough to make his entire risk analysis fall apart the second someone asked a real question. I sat in the back of the conference room during the presentation, sipping weak coffee as Julian strutted around in his tailored suit, clicking through slide after slide. The board nodded politely. Then someone asked about the volatility assumptions. Julian blinked, then stammered, then crumbled. The room turned cold. Eyes narrowed. Notes were taken. Another crack in the glass. And finally, the real play. For weeks, I'd watched the firm stumble like a boxer too proud to stay down. But I knew the knockout punch was coming. So I made sure I was ready. Using a contact in the Caribbean, I set up a shell company. Nothing fancy. Just a name and a Cayman Islands address. Through it, I quietly bet against Hudson and Locke's parent company's stock. It's called shorting. I was basically saying, I believe this company is going to fall, and I'm willing to make money when it does. It was risky. It was bold. And it was personal. The trades went through clean. No trail leading back to me. Now, all I had to do was wait. By the end of week 5, the cracks had become chasms. OCC examiners showed up unannounced. Julian's risk models were torn apart. The board called emergency meetings. I kept my head down, played the helpful consultant, and quietly packed my things. My job here was done. Greg stopped me on the way out. We're close to the edge, he said. But I think we'll make it. I didn't have the heart to tell him otherwise. Some things aren't meant to be saved. That night, I sat on my fire escape, looking out at the Brooklyn skyline. A cool breeze, a bottle of beer, and the soft glow of a CNBC ticker on my phone. Hudson and Locke stock was falling. And I was rising. Not in revenge. Not really. But in clarity. Some people burn bridges because they're angry. Others, because they finally see the fire was always coming. I could feel it coming before it hit. Like standing on the beach, watching the tide pull back too far, too fast. You don't need to see the wave to know it's coming. You just brace for the crash. The crash had a name: regulatory audit. Marcus, my old classmate at the OCC, wasn't just poking around anymore. He'd brought in a team. Real suits. Quiet. Sharp-eyed. They set up in a conference room at Hudson and Locke like they were moving in for good. Julian's desk was the main target. They pulled his trades, his emails, his risk reports. They looked at everything. Within 3 days, the first red flag flew up. capital reserve violations. That's a fancy way of saying Julian had been making big, risky bets without keeping enough money aside in case things went south. It's the kind of thing that gets banks shut down, or worse. When the news reached the top floor, the whole building got quieter. Like someone had turned down the volume on the world. People whispered in elevators. No one made eye contact in the hallway. The only person still pretending everything was fine? Julian Hudson. He strutted through the office like he was invincible. Still cracking jokes. Still wearing $2,000 shoes like they meant something. But I could see the panic creeping in around the edges. He knew the numbers didn't add up anymore. And so did Goldman Sachs. They were the firm's prime broker. Basically the financial muscle behind Hudson and Locke. They gave the firm leverage, access to capital, and the tools to play big on Wall Street. But when Goldman heard about the OCC audit, they pulled the trigger. Margin call. They wanted $500 million in collateral. Immediately. Money the firm didn't have. Not even close. That was the moment the building truly cracked. Traders stopped trading. Phones stopped ringing. People started printing resumes in the copy room. The board called an emergency meeting. And I was invited to watch. Not as a savior. Not as a friend. Just as a reminder of what they'd thrown away. I took a seat in the back corner of the boardroom. Leather chairs. Bottled water no one touched. At the head of the table sat Douglas Hudson, the firm's founder, and Julian's father. He looked tired. Julian was there too, flipping through a printout of numbers like he could magically change them by reading faster. Julian, Douglas said quietly, tell us the truth. How bad is it? Julian opened his mouth, closed it, then said something about temporary liquidity issues and unrealized gains. No one bought it. The CFO stepped in next. Greg looked pale. We're down 38% in client assets since last quarter, he said. We can't meet Goldman's demand. Silence. And then Douglas stood up. The whole room followed. He looked at his son, not with anger. Just disappointment. You're done, Julian, he said. Julian blinked. What? You're fired, Douglas repeated louder this time. Effective immediately. Julian laughed, this weird, nervous, high-pitched laugh like he couldn't believe his dad was serious. But the security guard outside the door told him otherwise. He was walked out in front of everyone. Head down. Tie loosened. Like a prince stripped of his crown. I didn't clap. But I didn't look away either. He had earned this. Every second of it. Later that afternoon, Douglas found me in the hallway. He looked even older now. Shoulders slumped. Voice cracked. Joshua, he said, I made a mistake. A big one. Letting Julian take over. Pushing you out. He sighed. I need you to stay. Permanently. Rebuild the desk. Steady the ship. We can offer full partner status. Name on the door. It was the kind of offer I once would have jumped at. But that was a lifetime ago. I reached into my pocket and pulled out something small. A burner phone. It was cheap. Ugly. The kind of phone you buy when you don't want to be found. I handed it to him. There are texts on there, I said. From Julian. Things he sent to traders. About ignoring regulations. Pushing trades through. One of them literally says, screw compliance, just book the yield. Douglas's hand trembled as he took it. I nodded once. Then I turned and walked away. No anger. No drama. Just peace. The next morning, I rode the subway back to Brooklyn. The city felt different. Like it had exhaled. On my phone, the headlines told the rest of the story. Hudson and Locke in freefall. Goldman freezes access to credit. Julian Hudson removed from board. I felt vindicated. Later that night, I logged into my Bloomberg terminal. Hudson and Locke stock was in a tailspin. And my short position? It was singing. But I didn't need to hold on any longer. I closed the trade. 3 weeks after Julian was fired, I left New York. Not forever. Just long enough to breathe again. I rented a cabin upstate. No cell service. No Bloomberg terminal. Just trees, air, and silence. I slept through the night for the first time in months. No screens. No graphs. No ticking clocks. Just me and peace. When I came back, there was a message waiting. It was from Diana Shaw. Come in Monday. Let's talk numbers. Shaw and Greer wasn't a huge firm, but it was smart. Quietly successful. They'd avoided the flashy headlines and stuck to solid work. The kind of place where people listened more than they spoke. I liked that. Diana made me an offer, head of fixed income. My own team. My own strategy. No frat boys. No legacy hires. No one calling me old guard. And I didn't come alone. When word got out that I'd landed at Shaw and Greer, the phone didn't stop buzzing. Pinecrest Pension Fund, the same client that had pulled out after Julian's mess, came back, asking if I'd handle their money again. Then came Northwood Trust, Silver Bay Insurance, and Hartwell Advisors. All of them had worked with me before. All of them left Hudson and Locke after I did. And now they followed me here. Diana grinned across the table when I showed her the signed letters. You didn't just bring a desk, she said. You brought an empire. Meanwhile, back in Manhattan, Hudson and Locke was unraveling fast. The OCC audit became a full-blown investigation. Clients fled. Credit lines froze. Goldman officially pulled its backing. The firm tried to restructure, but it was too late. 2 months after I left, Hudson and Locke filed for Chapter 11. Bankruptcy. The once proud boutique firm, the shiny tower in Midtown, the brand that Julian thought he could wear like a crown. It all collapsed. I watched it happen from my office at Shaw and Greer. Coffee in one hand, calm in the other. The CNBC anchor announced it like a death notice. Hudson and Locke Capital files for bankruptcy protection. Sources say reckless trading and mismanagement led to the downfall. They cut to stock footage of the building. People leaving with cardboard boxes. Someone had scribbled "Boys Club closed" on the side of a delivery van. Why didn't I find that funny? Julian? He didn't vanish completely. Someone sent me a screenshot a few weeks later. A social media post from a bar in Miami Beach. There he was, Julian Hudson, behind the counter, wearing a backwards cap, shaking a cocktail shaker like he was auditioning for a movie. The caption read, "Ask for the yield bomb. Made by a guy with real hedge fund experience." I showed the photo to Diana. She raised an eyebrow. You gonna say something? I shook my head. No. Let him talk. He's finally in a job where all he has to do is shake, not think. We laughed, and that was the end of it. My days now are simple. I wake up at 6. Walk to work. My name's on the glass next to Shaw and Greer. That still feels surreal. I lead a team that trusts me. We don't chase wild profits. We protect the people who trust us with their money. And it works. We're not flashy. We're not loud. But we're steady. Every now and then, I get asked if I miss the old days. The adrenaline. The fire. The chaos of Wall Street. I just smile. Because I don't miss it. I survived it. And I came out better. That night, back in my apartment, I powered up my Bloomberg terminal for one last look. Hudson and Locke's ticker was grayed out. Delisted. No volume. No movement. Just a dead line where there used to be noise. The last piece. I clicked through my open screens. Market trends. Treasury rates. Chat messages from old friends. One from Marcus at the OCC. You lit the match. I just watched it burn. I replied. I didn't light it. I just refused to carry the gasoline. Then I reached the settings screen. Delete terminal login? Yes/no. I hovered for a second. Then I clicked yes. The screen went dark. That was it. No confetti. No parade. Just a clean break. Julian played his game and lost. I played mine and walked away. In finance, they say loyalty is currency. Julian defaulted on his. And I cashed in mine, quietly, completely, and on my own terms. Some battles aren't won with noise. They're won in silence. And I'd said everything I needed to say. It's funny how things settle when the storm passes. Not with a bang. Not with fireworks or champagne. Just stillness. Here are some questions for you, our viewers. Have you ever seen someone get fired, only to come back stronger? Share your story. Do you think Joshua went too far, or was his revenge justified? What would you have done if you were in Joshua's shoes? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell because we have more stories coming up just for you.